What's up, everybody? This is Networkchain. Hope this finds you doing well. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Lots to talk about over the past week. As we can see, Bitcoin is currently down nearly 4% over the past 7 days. It's trading at around $78,000. So it hasn't really been able to break above $82,000. And if you look here at the weekly chart, you can see that we are headed back down from where we were last week. I believe we reached a high, as you can see, nearly $83,000 last week, got to $82,822 before starting the descent, and so now we're in the high 70s. So we'll see if we'll continue to stay in this range between high 70s to the early 80s, but there was a lot of low volume even when we got above 80s, so we still are in a down trend from last October. So we are looking to see if there's going to be any difference in trend sometime later on this year, but it could take some time. So just be mindful and aware that we are still definitely in a bear market. We may continue to see some pops up from time to time, but there hasn't been a change in the trend just yet. One of the big news stories that came out over the past week is that the U.S. Senate committee has advanced the Clarity bill. So now it's going to go to the Senate floor. So the Clarity Act is the newest legislation that has been drafted, and different iterations have been going back and forth with the Senate Banking Committee, and they finally approved that draft on Thursday, and so now it will next go to the U.S. Senate. And the Clarity Bill, as you can see here, we're looking at the differences between the Genius Act, which has already been signed into law, and that was basically a legislation related specifically to payment stablecoins, and it's overseen by banking regulators, and it establishes the first federal framework for stablecoin issuance and consumer protection. So there's basically various rules when it comes to stablecoin issuers like Tether and Circle, which issues USDC. Now, the Clarity Act, it is providing a framework for digital assets generally. So it's not only with regards to decentralized finance, but also with regards to tokenization, as well as classifying different types of cryptocurrencies and who has oversight. So you can see this divides the oversight between the SEC, which relates to securities, and the CFTC, which relates to commodities. Bitcoin has already been declared a commodity, so it's going to provide some clarity when it comes to which cryptocurrencies, which digital assets would be classified by as securities or commodities, and that's very important. And one of the reasons why this act is also very important is when it comes to larger institutions that are interested in getting into the industry right now, which is about a $2.5 to $3 trillion industry. It could potentially grow even larger, because now if this passes at some point in time in the future, this will give basically the green light for those larger institutions to come into the space. Some of them obviously have already come into the space. We know with the Bitcoin ETFs that have done extremely well, breaking records with regards to the amount of volume and assets under management over the last couple of years now. The points of contention that has been going back and forth with regards to the draft is, several banks understand that they would be in high competition, particularly if stablecoins are able to yield. Providers and stablecoin issuers are able to provide a higher yield than what you would necessarily see with a particular bank when you're holding US dollars in a bank account, for example, at a savings account. So there's been some contention back and forth with regards to that. So we definitely are going to continue to keep you posted on what happens with the Clarity Act. As I mentioned, it's now going to be going to the Senate, so they would have to pass it before it could then potentially go on through Congress, make sure that the House and the Senate passes it, and then it would go on to the president to sign. So we still have a little ways to go, but this was definitely a big step in getting a draft that was approved, and it was bipartisan by Democrats and Republicans that both voted for this latest iteration of the Clarity Act, and it's now going to be heading over to the Senate floor. So, another major news story over the past week, we got CPI and PPI. CPI is the Consumer Price Index. PPI is the Producer Price Index. So, it's basically consumer index in relation to inflation from the consumer side. And then PPI is inflation when it comes to the producers, the wholesalers, the sellers of particular products. So, we did see that CPI has gone up, which is the measure basically of inflation. So headline CPI went up to 3.8%, up about 0.5% from what it was in March. And so 3.8% was for April. And then PPI, which I don't have here, but that was at around 6%, and that was also up above the numbers from March as well. I believe it was up over 1% from the March numbers. So make sure to check me on that. But definitely PPI has gone up as well. So we're seeing that the cost of goods and services are continuing to go up. And so this could be an issue when it comes to whether or not we may eventually go into a recession down the line. Obviously, it's very difficult for a lot of people out here trying to make sure that they're able to pay their bills. And when things continue to go up in price, obviously it makes it much more difficult if we are not able to have our salaries and the money that we're bringing in and our income is not going at least the rate of inflation to be able to keep up. So in order for you to keep up, you need to be making sure that the amount that you're bringing in income is at least over 3%. We say on average inflation every year is about 2 to 3%. Obviously, when we look at our insurance prices, car prices, gas prices, things of that nature, it's going up much more than that. But even so, even if we just take a conservative look at inflation and say it's 3% a year, we need to be making more than 3% a year every year just to keep up, just to stay stabilized. So we have to make sure that we find ways, and that's why we have this channel, finding ways to be able to preserve purchasing power and increase purchasing power so we can sustain and withstand, basically, I should say, withstand inflation as we continue to see month over month, year over year, the price of goods and services continue to go up. Now, we here at Networkchain, we obviously talk a lot about cryptocurrencies and digital assets and Bitcoin, but also it's important for us to understand the other emerging markets and other ways that we can continue to move forward in building up that value that we talk about, that store of being able to increase our purchasing power. And one of those ways is through artificial intelligence. Obviously, that is now in the zeitgeist, and people are learning more and more about the infrastructure of AI. And as you can see, the robots are here. Not that they're coming, but they are here. So you can see here, Figure AI. They're currently a private company, but they produce robots, and they have been showing a stream for the last 5 days of robots doing a simple task of basically taking packages and putting the labels face down, similar to what someone at Amazon currently is doing right now. And so they could then be scanned and moving on down the production line to get these packages out. So you can see here, I stopped where they're showing a transfer of robots. So basically the only difference is in each robot is they can only, at least right now, go for about several hours, and then they have to go back to charge. So this is just showing you one robot to the next. And so now this last robot is now getting ready to, as you can see in the back here, getting ready to go onto a charger so it can charge and then be ready for its next round. And so as we can see, this could also be a major issue when it comes to the overall economic perspective when it comes to jobs, because we're seeing, and that was another number that came out this past week. Every week we get jobless claims. The jobless claims increased from the past week. So we're seeing that, that goes up and down depending on the industry and what's happening. But this is definitely a situation where we can see the robots could be taking and disrupting a lot of jobs. So we're seeing here that they have a few robots They can go 24/7. As you can see, this has been going on for over 86 hours. And actually, that is me just showing you where they did a transfer between robots. But this is currently showing they now have added, brought in an intern to go up against the robot. And so you can see here that with humans, they're going to have to take breaks, mandatory breaks depending on the state, and then usually the shifts are 9 to 10 hours. I believe for this intern it's going to be a 10-hour shift, and they're going to see how many packages in that 10-hour shift that the intern's able to do compared to the robots. You can see that the intern is currently leading the robot. And let's go to real time now. So you can see the human intern is still beating the robot currently, and the intern's been going for just under 2 hours now. So you can go to Figure AI. Their stream is on YouTube, and you can check it out to see how the robot and the intern ends up doing. Now, with AI, just generally speaking, a lot of us, many of you who are watching this video are probably a little bit more up to speed on kind of what's going on currently, but we still are very, very early. And so when we talk about getting into an industry that's an emerging market, it's important for us to get into early. That's how you can make potentially generational wealth, is understanding what the trend is and getting in early. And so obviously with Bitcoin, for example, if you got in early, you've done very well over the last 10, 15 years. And now we're seeing with AI, we're still very early in this space. And so this is a graphic that went viral a couple of months ago. And if you see here, each dot is representative of 3.2 million people. And so the gray dots are for representing people who have never used AI before. Green are for people who have been using a free version of, say, ChatGPT, for example. And then the yellow is representative of the number of people who actually have some type of paid version. And then the red is for people who are using actual coding and doing their own type of coding using AI. So you can see that we're still very, very early when you take in consideration the entire world of over 8 billion people. So if you want to get in early on a trend, AI, robotics, blockchain technologies, that's what we're focusing in on right now. And so we're trying to learn as much as possible. And of course, we're going to be spreading that information to you because we want to make sure that we all come up together. So we really appreciate you checking us out on X as well as on IG. And we look forward to linking up with you on the network chain. Take care. Bye-bye.